Hi, I'm Chuck Norman, and I want to welcome you and thank you for coming to America is Calling. This is our first episode, and trust me, you're going to be able to tell that I am amateur at best. However, it is not about me, it is about the interesting people that I want to bring to you. Our first guest this week is Robert MadDog Pilcher. I've known MadDog for quite a few years, and trust me, he's got some great stories, but he's also full of information, and I'm better for knowing this man.
America calling, America calling. Will you answer? That's a good question. Will you ever answer? I'd like to welcome all our studio audience out here and our listeners. Welcome to Dallas, Georgia. Beautiful Dallas, Georgia. Well, we're more closer to Hiram, I guess, but it makes no difference. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm just blessed to be here, brother.
I'm always happy to be here. At my age, I'm happy to be anywhere.
I bet.
But I'd like to say hello to all our listeners out there, specifically Rebecca over in Gadsden, and we got Velvet in California. We've got some listeners out there.
I hear that you have brought like the whole state of Alabama.
I think I have.
Wow.
We'll eventually have them all over here. In fact,
That's
we just might have to add about 100 chairs so we can have a studio audience.
Oh, that's awesome.
To cheer us all on.
Well, the bar and saloon will be done in a little while, so we'll have a place for them to hang
Oh, that's
out
all
and
we
sit.
need.
Yeah. And the
Live
sitting area,
video in a bar.
Yes, there you go. We've not been around any
I can
parties.
see 911 being called right now,
Sure.
again. And we're talking and everything, and he asked me would I like a tour of the museum and the building and everything, and I thought, yeah, I'd love to. So he's walking around and we're talking and everything, and he asked me my name, and I said my name is said I was a Sergeant Pilcher, stationed down in Schweinfurt. And he starts talking to me, and he says my name is Manfred, and I said, oh, Manfred. I said, and I was just joking. I said, you would be Manfred Raml, the son of General Raml, would he? He says, oh, he starts trying. He says, you know my father? I kind of went, oh no, don't tell me. I happened to walk in. The mayor of Stuttgart was Manfred Raml. That was the one that was giving me the tour.
Oh my goodness.
I thought he was joking at first when I said, no, and I said, your name would be Manfred Raml, and I was making a joke. And he said, oh yeah, you know my father. I said, oh, don't tell me your father's name was Erwin Raml. And he goes, oh yeah, it's Peter Raml. But that was his son. He was the mayor or the Burgermeister of Stuttgart.
Now, how old were you when that happened?
Yeah, Germany. I was about 20, 21 years old at that time. Yeah, stationed in Germany.
So this would have been before Vietnam.
Oh yeah. Well, I was
Okay.
in Germany from early '63 or last part of '65.
Okay.
And then last part of '65 down in Benning as an instructor, and then I went to Patton Hall at Fort McPherson, Deputy Chief Staff Office, and I worked in operations office up there.
Well, you were just saying a minute ago, you were talking about the two generals.
General Paul Tibbets.
Yes.
Oh God, a nice guy. He had no regrets of what he did. In fact, somebody had even asked him one time, said, do you feel bad about nuking all this? He said, hell no. He said, they started the war, we ended the war. And he said, I didn't want any more American casualties. If we had done a land invasion of Japan, if we had been forced to do it, they were estimating that we would have taken pretty close to 1 million casualties, because they were arming women and children with wooden spears. They were going to all fight to the death. This is true. And people can look this up in the history books. And Tibbets said, I would have nuked every city in Japan to end that war. He said, I didn't want to see another American die in that war. He said, we didn't start it. He said, I finished it. And he said, I have no regrets for what I've done.
There's a lot of
I can
people.
understand that.
There's a lot of people that can be thankful today because of that, because that's
A
generations
lot of
deep.
people wouldn't be born today if their fathers had been, or grandfathers or whatever, had been killed invading Japan. And you know, they predicted the war would probably continue on to 46, 47, and even 48 before we would have got the island under control, because they were prepared to fight to the death, women and children. They were arming them with wooden spears to attack Americans on the beaches. They were all going to be, the whole country was going to commit suicide, literally.
You were talking about the generals.
General Paul Tibbets.
Yeah, General Paul Tibbets,
Mm-hmm.
and you were talking about General York,
Alvin C. York.
Alvin C. York,
Mm-hmm.
and then you also just spoke on another general. Who was that one? No, I'm sorry.
Oh, the old cavalryman.
Well, it was the general, the foreign general's son you were talking about.
The foreign general. You have to refresh my memory.
He was the mayor at whatever.
Oh, General Manfred Raml.
Right.
Right.
When you were in Heidelberg, correct?
In Heidelberg.
Tell us a little bit.
That was just unreal. But as we were talking about General Tibbets, I met General Tibbets years ago. And in fact, it's been about 35 years ago. And we had coffee together. We were discussing what he had accomplished in World War II. And the general had no regrets at that time, which I can understand. He flat told me that he would have bombed every city in Japan to end that war. He said he felt that no more American boys should die in World War II. And the Japanese were prepared to fight to the end. They were giving out spears to women and children. They were going to commit national suicide.
That's unbelievable. What was the point in those spears to the women and children? I mean,
fight to the death.
Fight to the death.
The
So
samurai
they were
spear.
expecting to be able to fight the United States soldier.
Right. They didn't have enough weapons and rifles to go around, so they were preparing spears. They were actually having bamboo spears made to give to women and children to fight. These are true stories. They're all in the history books. And thank God we didn't lose any more than we had to. And I'm glad the war. I mean, I'm sorry that so many people had to die in the two cities, but if the Japanese, they started the war. I mean, well, I just admit the facts. They bombed Pearl Harbor. They started the war, and we ended it. And luckily, in a way, maybe we also saved a lot of more Japanese, too, that we wouldn't have had to kill on the beaches if we would have had to invade that country.
Looking back on all that you've learned
Yes.
regarding power, people of power.
Power corrupts.
Yes. Do you think that, and this is just a conspiracy theory in my own head, I mean, you're going to understand that that just happens. Is there any way that Japan could have got set up to bring us into the war, and whoever set them up knew that what the end result could be? Because I mean, we weren't hiding it at that point, were we? And the Manhattan Project had been going on for years, correct?
No, the Manhattan Project didn't officially start until after Pearl Harbor was attacked. Now, we had been studying the possibility of the atom, and possibly be possible that a bomb could be made from one, but we were not really serious about it at that point. And but the reason why the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor was to try to knock the American fleet out, because the Japanese empire needed oil. And America, because we had tried to get them out of Japan, and not out of Japan, get the Japanese out of China, because at that time, China was the Chinese were being slaughtered. You read stories, the rape of Nanking, and I mean, unreal how many Chinese were slaughtered, men, women, and children by the Japanese, because they were brutal. They were very brutal people. But we had cut off their oil supply, and Japan has no natural oil. So the only oil they could get it from was from places like Indonesia, Malaysia, places of this nature, and little smaller islands. And because we had at that point one of the largest navies in the Pacific, they had to destroy us. And the only thing that saved the Americans December the 7th in 1941 was that the aircraft carriers were still at sea. They were supposed to be in port, but they came in late. because that's what the Japanese were looking for, not so much the battleships, but destroy our carrier fleet. Because if you got a carrier fleet, you can always put your aircraft over the enemy islands. Because back in those days, an aircraft, even the best fighter planes we had, 600-700 mile range. And you're looking at the Pacific, it's thousands of miles across, so we would have never had aircraft that could have gone from the United States to bomb Japan. That's where we had to do the island hopping. That's why Iwo Jima was so precious to us, because
So
we
how
knew.
were they able to?
Go ahead.
How were they able to fly that far?
The Japanese, off their carriers. They had.
You just said that.
The Japanese had
They
a
were
lot
already-
of. They had a lot of carriers in the Pacific. Actually, when the war started, the Japanese had more carriers than just about anybody.
Well, this is where everybody's going to say, "Hey, Chuck, just sit the hell back and let the man talk," because that's what I'm going to do.
Well, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, they had 4 carriers. They put a lot of aircraft over Pearl Harbor. They were prepared for that, but they had to destroy our aircraft carriers. And luckily, like I say, they were still at sea at that time, and that's the only thing that saved us. If we'd have lost our aircraft carriers, we wouldn't have won Midway, because Midway is where we broke the back of the Japanese. In fact, most of the carriers that used on the attack at Pearl Harbor were destroyed at Midway. And the only reason we destroyed them at Midway is we fooled the Japanese, because we broke the Japanese code. And the Japanese were not expecting us to be at Midway. And we knew they were going to attack Midway because we had put out a radio broadcast that Midway was short on water supplies, and that they needed more water there to have water brought in, because there's not a lot of natural water on Midway Island, wells and such. Well, the Japanese in their code used their code to say that there was a shortage of water on the possible target that they were going to attack. And at that point, we knew that Midway was where they were going to hit. So we ambushed the Japanese. And that was the turning point in the Pacific War, was Midway. And we broke the Japanese carrier fleet. And after that, it was all downhill for Japan. But we still had to take island after island after island. And then when we finally took Saipan, Iwo Jima, then we had a base for our B-29 bombers to bomb Japan. And we talk about Hiroshima and we talk about Nagasaki, 2 of the cities that were nuked. Did you know that more people were killed in Tokyo by the B-29s dropping firebombs? Because most Japanese cities were built of wood, not stone. The Empress Palace was all stone, the castle. But the majority of Tokyo at that time was all wooden buildings. And there were more people killed in the Tokyo raid than there were in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, just by firebombs.
Wow. I did not know that. They don't teach that.
They need, that's the trouble with our school system now. We don't teach history. And that's why we seem to repeat history. We don't learn the lessons. Very few things are taught about World War II or World War I. In fact, I'd be willing to bet you that probably maybe 2 out of every 100 Americans could even answer one question about the Revolutionary War, or the War of 1812, and all the other little wars we've been in, the Spanish-American War that we fought to free Cuba from the Spanish. But very few people understand that. And they need to understand history, because when you understand history, you can change the future. So try not to do the things that caused all these wars. And I'll be honest with you, I'm sick and tired of our people dying in wars. I mean, I've shed blood for this country. I spent a long time in a hospital, Walter Reed. I was in Walter Reed almost a full year from Vietnam during the Tet Offensive. I've seen too many of my fellow brothers and sisters lose blood, lose their lives. I've buried too many veterans. I'm tired of all these useless wars that don't need to be fought. And that's what I'm afraid of now with an election coming up. You got one party that's totally against war, but you got one party that's all for war. This thing going on with the Ukraine, now all the stuff in Israel, you got the North Koreans all fired up. They're supplying supplies to the Russians. if we're not careful, we could end up in a third world war. People say, oh, it'll never happen. Well, I'm sure a lot of people didn't think Pearl Harbor would be bombed either. I think a lot of people didn't think at the time that the Confederacy would fire on Fort Sumter.
And honestly, in my lifetime,
yeah,
I can't believe that there is a very large minority of population, no specific race, gender, or anything meant there, but
yeah,
you split all the people, there's at least, on a good day, 40% that, judging by their actions in the last 6 weeks, last 6 months, and even going back for the last 2 to 3 years, straight, honestly, I don't believe they love this country.
I don't think a lot of people live in this country anymore. They want to turn it into a communist country. And I was watching the Democratic Convention the other night, and I was also watching the freak show that was happening outside. I don't know if a lot of people saw that. It was pretty close.
Nobody saw that. It didn't make news until today.
It looked like a circus coming to town. Half the people were dressed looked like clowns out there, ranting and raving and screaming. These are Americans. These are not the Americans that I fought wars for and defended this country. You know, I went in the military in 1962 before the Cuban Missile Crisis. And at that time I thought, oh God, what have I got myself into? Because, I mean, they were issuing us live ammo and Russian phrase books, and I thought, oh God, we're going into a nuclear war. Thank God, no missile, no torpedo or weapons were fired. It was a standoff in Cuba to get the Russians out. And I'm just thankful that the world didn't end, and it came very close. Everybody was ready to pop missiles and take each other out, and it could happen. So that's the frightening aspect of it. And then I served time in Germany with the old 3rd Infantry Division on the border up there, watching the Warsaw Pact, practicing their maneuvers out there to come and wipe us off the face of the earth if a war ever did start. I remember the alerts going off over there. I remember when Kennedy was killed. Sirens went off everywhere. They had us all lined up in our vehicles. I mean, we thought at that time, we did not know that it was a gunman, supposedly a gunman, Oswald. At that time, we thought the government thought it might have been a Soviet attempt to destroy or kill our president, John F. Kennedy.
Why does it always go to the Russians?
Everybody wants to play. You know, the Russians, the Russian people are no really different than us. They just live in a different country. Granted, they've had a rougher time in their past history because, you know, they didn't come out of serfdom until 1901, 1902, right before the First World War.
Well, I get a little bit more angry in the wintertime too.
Yeah, it's cold over there in the wintertime. I know I wouldn't want to be in Russia during the wintertime. Yeah. But the Russians are kind of paranoid, and I really can't blame them because they've been invaded by everybody. You know, people don't understand the Russian people have been invaded by the Mongols. They overran them, Genghis Khan. They almost destroyed Russia. They were attacked by Napoleon. Napoleon came into Russia and almost took over, but luckily he was prepared for the Russian winter, just like the Germans were. The First World War, the Germans just about overran Russia. Second World War, the Russians were almost overrun by the Nazis. They're a paranoid people, and that's why they protect their borders. And they're totally paranoid. And I think if we had not have tried to pressure the Ukraine into coming into NATO, I don't think the Russians would have attacked. I'll be honest with you. I don't think they would have attacked. And I can't blame the Russians because they did not want NATO on their border, just like we did not want Russia in Cuba on our border under the Monroe Doctrine. See, most people don't even understand the Monroe Doctrine. And it was to keep foreign powers out of the Western Hemisphere.
So let's take a little break. Let's come back on the Monroe Doctrine.
I will definitely come back.
All right. Hey, wait till the end. I grabbed some pictures from MadDog, and I tried to put them in chronological order. If this doesn't show that his roots are buried deep into this country, then I don't know what will. Thank you, MadDog. I do appreciate your service, and I appreciate your friendship, and I really appreciate your mentorship. Thank you, brother.
The Monroe Doctrine, we have to go back to the 1800s. We don't have a time machine, but I think we can come up with enough evidence of what happened at that time. But the Monroe Doctrine was to keep the foreign influence of Europe out of the Western Hemisphere. Because at that time, France owned most of Louisiana, most of the Midwest. Spain, still in Florida. Portugal was in Brazil. Spain was also in Mexico. And we did not want the problems that were plaguing the Europeans, which they were constantly at war at that time, to be brought into the Western Hemisphere. So we wanted to rule our own selves over here. That's the reason that we fought the Revolutionary War, so we could rule ourselves and remove England from the influence. But we still had France, we still had Spain, we had all the other empires that were trying to move into this. And in fact, we had the Habsburgs, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, were ruling Mexico at that time. The Habsburgs. Well, that was a little bit later, but in the 1860s, right after when the Mexican revolutions were all going on, which are still going on to this day. But that's essentially what the Monroe Doctrine was, to keep the foreign influence out, because it was causing a lot of problems over here and plaguing us. And we did not want to get in war, involved in all the little domestic wars that were going on in Europe at that time, which was France against England, France against Spain. I mean, it was just, everybody was fighting over there at that time. So, and I can understand why the Russian Empire didn't want the NATO on their borders, because we don't want foreign influence on ours. And I think if you leave the Russians alone, more likely they'll leave us alone.
Sure.
Yeah. Because I don't think the Russian people really want an atomic war, because nobody wins in an atomic war. When everybody's got the bomb, nobody wins. But we were also talking about earlier about PTSD and veterans and veteran suicides. And it is extremely high, way higher than a national average. And it's because of what a lot of these veterans went through, and what they saw and what they were subject to. And a lot of them do not know how to cope with it. They don't know how to open up and talk to anybody. It's difficult for them. They can't sit down with somebody at the Burger King that works as behind the counter and tells them about, well, I killed all these people and saw my buddies die in combat and blah, blah, blah. They don't understand. In fact, they look at you rather strange. What they need to do is talk to another veteran, communicate, because they've been there. They've been overseas. They've been in the same circumstances. And a lot of them cope with it better than others. But if they have somebody that's mutually been in the same circumstance, then they're better to deal with it. And like I was telling you before, any veteran that wants to call me and talk to me, or wants to meet for coffee at 2 a.m, I don't care, at the Waffle House, I'll buy the coffee. But they're more than welcome, because I don't want them to die. I've seen too many people die already. I don't want to see another veteran die. And I'm sure the Veterans Administration, which will probably be mad about this, I think they're looking for us to die off anyway. They don't have to. They don't have to help us.
I feel like that about healthcare in general. And I know that it's just my own feelings about my loved one or whatever.
Well, you know, the Veterans Hospital here in Atlanta now, it takes months to get treatment, but they've opened up the doors now for illegal aliens to be treated there. This was in the news, so it's happening. We can't, you've got veterans that fought these wars for this country. They can't get the proper treatment they need, but yet you can have illegals go to the Veterans Hospital and get treated for free. That's not right.
Well, on the helping side of that, you told me that you go on Wednesdays to a group. Is it on Wednesdays?
It's Wednesdays. It's a PTSD group.
Yeah.
That I go to, and we usually have a fairly good turnout. I mean, it's sometimes 25 to maybe 40, maybe sometimes 50 people, and they'll sit around and everybody will try to talk. Not all at one time, of course,
Sure.
But when somebody gets the floor, then they'll try to open up and tell people what they went through and what they experienced, and it seems to help some of them to get it out. But and some of them have severe PTSD. I mean, it's very obvious for what they went through.
Sure.
Like I told you before, I was prior service before I even went to Vietnam, so in a way, I guess it didn't affect me as much as somebody who was drafted and 16 weeks later thrown into a jungle war. You know, they don't have enough time to adapt to it. But you know, being prior service and serving overseas like I did, and you know, being a sergeant when I got over there, I'm the one that had to run the platoon. I'm the one that could not panic, because if I panicked, everybody would panic.
Sure.
So I'm the one they always turned to. I'm the one that took care of them. I hate to say, I felt like the babysitter sometimes with them.
Sure.
Because most of them were younger than I was.
Yeah.
Because when I got to Vietnam, I'd already been married, divorced, and had custody of my child. I had a son, and most of these guys were 18, 19 years old.
Thank you for joining us. I really do appreciate you. Please carve out a little bit of time every few weeks to spend a half hour or an hour with us, as I hope to bring you more interesting stories from very interesting people. MadDog would love to hear from you, so please send anything that you'd like him to answer in the future back, as I hope to have him back soon. And anything that you would like to leave for me, I don't care what it is, how ugly I am, how marvelous this beard is, or anything. Just let me know. Thank you.